You know you're in the right place, don't you? It's another fantastic Saturday. It's another opportunity for us to get together around our virtual coffee table and have a great conversation. It's going to be, I think, one of the more fun, if not most fun, conversations that we've had in a long time. They're all good, but this one's going to be great today. So put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation because it is time once again for Coffee Breaks with Steve. All right, I got to have my coffee here. Format of the picture may look a little bit funny to you. That's because I'm not going to be here alone. I want to introduce my amazing special guest co-host for today, and many of you may already know her because she's a regular contributor in the chat on Coffee Breaks with Steve. But welcome as my co-host today, Kim Baker. Hey, Kim. Let's see. I think your mic's still muted. I don't know if that's on my end or your end. You may have to unmute there.
No, it's definitely mine.
All right. Hey, welcome, Kim. I'm glad that, it's I say welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve, but you're regularly a part of Coffee Breaks with Steve. So welcome to being on camera here live and joining me as co-host today. And thanks for doing this.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I appreciated the fact that you did in the comments make sure that you put your usual greeting in there, your good meowing out. I should let you say it out loud, in fact.
Good meowing, good afternoon, and happy Catterday, everyone.
That's fantastic. So take a minute here. I want to say hi to a few other people who have joined the conversation already this morning. Jerry Thompson, good morning. Shalane is here. Rick is here. Just looking to see. Kim obviously is here. I love that. And Carla is here. And, you know, Kim, I just brought you on camera. When I have guests who aren't co-hosting, I always go through a more lengthy introduction and biography. So just for those who may not be as familiar with you other than what they see in the chat, what should people know about you?
There's not a whole bunch to know. I'm a freckly, although you can't really see it here, fiery, part ginger. I currently reside in the Midwest, but I met Steve and his family when I was in the San Francisco Bay Area. We met at church, and I'm just happy that we all stayed in touch, thanks to Steve.
And you are not, in spite of some interpretations, a crazy cat lady.
I'm a cat lady. I am, according to Google, one cat short of crazy. So there's still a little room. There's a little wiggle room.
It's like that's an interesting. You know, you could think about a lot of different ways to. So I'm one cat shy of really being crazy here. You know that's great.
I've learned to embrace it. I have cats. Yeah. I mean, cats have me. I've been adopted multiple times. I'm very blessed to say. Yeah. I vacuum almost daily.
Use the lint roller and everything else, probably, right?
I should have stock. I have one in each room.
Hey, I see a part of your shirt, but I think going along with our themes and what we just talked about, people should see that. So it says coffee. There's a picture of a cat holding a cup of coffee, and it says because murder is wrong. Yeah, that's the way I feel about my morning cups.
Murder is wrong.
Yes, but let's not forget.
No, let's not forget. Out in the street, we call it meowder. Everyone, drink, please.
Listen, before we get, and there's something else about you that is relevant to the conversation we're going to be getting into in a few minutes here. Our theme today, our topic today is about something called synesthesia. And we're going to get into more detail about that. But I believe you have a confession to make before we get there.
I do. So my cat Chorizo, his name is Chorizo, like the sausage. And one of the reasons he got his name is because that is the closest word to the color of his coat that I could think of at the time. So I have multiple forms of synesthesia, which we'll get into, but one of them is grapheme color. So words, letters, numbers, sounds, they all evoke color orientation for me. And my mother thought I was crazy for a very long time.
But we already know you're one cat shy of being crazy, so we're good. Hey, before we get into the topic today, we have some sweet and savories that I think we should share with people. There's some interesting things going on this week that were in the news and some updates. But the first one, that NPR had a story a couple of days ago about Wally, the emotional support alligator, who actually lives in Pennsylvania. And Wally actually has a lot of followers on social media. And I think you mentioned, Kim, that you have followed Wally and know some of Wally's story.
I love Wally so much. I wish Wally would come tour here.
And you're not that far away. I mean, you could write a letter to his human and see if that's possible, because he does travel and do things. But it'll tell you a little bit about Wally and why the story came up in NPR. Wally is an emotional support alligator. His human being is a guy by the name of Joy Henney, who lives in Lower Paxton Township, Pennsylvania, which is, it's like west of Philadelphia, almost considered central Pennsylvania, I guess. It's actually north of Baltimore, Maryland. Sort of probably if you triangulated it, you could get there just as easily from Philly or Baltimore. But anyway, this guy actually runs a reptile rescue, but Wally is his emotional support alligator, and they go around different places. And he says he's worked with alligators before. He says, I've never worked with an alligator. It doesn't bite, but he doesn't tape Wally's mouth shut because Wally does not bite. In fact, Joy describes him when he holds him cuddles him as being like a big security blanket, which
He
is
just smiles at you.
he
When
just
people hug him, he
smiles.
just smiles. And
Yeah,
his
he's
little
just
eyes sparkle.
his eyes sparkle, his little reptile eyes sparkle. But anyway, they were invited. The friend of theirs um, knows a number of the players who play baseball for Philadelphia, and they were invited to go to see the Phillies and meet some of the players. Well, they got to the park, and they got there a little bit late, and the players were already working out and getting ready, or out of the locker room and getting ready on the field, and so they couldn't go visit the players. So Joey's friend just said, well, why, I've got tickets to the game, why don't we just go into the game? But she hadn't checked to see what the policy was at the baseball park. And when they tried to get in, they found that they wouldn't let. I mean, you can imagine, if you're not familiar with what's going on, you see a guy walk up with an alligator on a leash. They wouldn't let them in because apparently the baseball park, Citizens Bank Park, has a policy that only guide dogs, service animals, or service animals in training are allowed into the park. And they didn't consider an alligator to fit the category, and so they got turned away. But um, and it kind of made local news and even some national news about this guy bringing this alligator in. But Joey wanted to make it clear they don't just show up places. They never go any place that they're not invited. Obviously, they were invited to go see the Phillies, and that didn't work out. And he wasn't offended by it. He understands that some people have issues with it. But they've got, here's just a screenshot of the TikTok page that Wally the alligator has. And you can see in these pictures, I know some of it's kind of small for the viewers, you can see all these people cuddling Wally. And apparently he's just the sweetest alligator around. And Kim, I think we need to figure out some way to get you and Wally together for a meeting.
I could definitely use some alligator snuggles. Just look at that little face. He just loves to cuddle.
I get it. I understand what you're saying.
What I love about Wally is his aura is yellow, but his name is yellow too, because Wally, for me, W, especially capital W, is yellow. And that's the dominant letter in his name. A is red. LL, they're very weak lavenders. Y is a light pink. So I love that Wally's name matches his personality.
I can see people, as you were describing that, I can see people tuning in. We can't see the expressions on their faces, but going, huh? Well, we're going to be talking about that in a few minutes. You're going to have a much better understanding. So, yeah, we need to get into that. Hey, how many of you remember out there, about a year ago, not quite a year ago now, we had a guest on the show from Scotland by the name of Beth, from Beth Roars. And she is a content creator, YouTuber, who does reaction videos and her own music, and even has some stuff on her YouTube channel where she goes out and tries different things just to stretch her own understanding of things. Beth was on the show, and when we did our update episode a couple of months back, we talked about the fact that she was working on an album. Well, she's getting very close to releasing that album, and we actually invited Beth to give us an update, and she prepared this little video for us.
Hello, I'm Beth, and I am a singer, vocal coach, and YouTuber. Most people know me from my YouTube channel Beth Roars, where I look at amazing artists around the world and work out what makes them so good. But now it's my turn, and I am releasing my first ever album, Fable. It's really exciting. It's a journey from darkness into light. It's my own personal journey, and I can't wait to share it with you. The album is going to be released as singles on all the streaming platforms, that's Spotify, Tidal, Apple, wherever you go to get your music content. And I'm going to release each single individually over a series of months, but you can get a physical copy of the CD or vinyl from my website and listen to the whole thing in one go if you like. Thanks for listening, I hope you enjoy, and big thanks to Steve for having me here.
All right. So, and thank you, Beth, for taking the time. Talk about a busy lady. She's got, I mean, any given time, the stuff that she's displaying on her channel is what she's doing to get ready to release this album. She's got a lot going on. So appreciate, Beth, that you were willing to take the time to prepare that little video update for us. And you can see how excited she is about the release of this, right? I mean, that just comes through. But just wanted to share where you can find this. This is just a screenshot, and we're going to put all of this out on our site too, all of our sites. But where you can find Beth and where you can find her album, she has the YouTube channel, which is just Beth Roars. And there's also that's a screenshot of her album cover, which I think is just gorgeous in and of itself. But you can go to her website and find information about all of her merchandise, including the album, which, as she mentioned, even though she's going to be releasing online the albums one single at a time, you can go to her website and actually order the CD or the vinyl. And I already have my order in for her CD. And I should mention this. I think I talked about this a while back. One of the things that Beth did was she reached out to all of her subscribers and followers, gave anybody who wanted to an opportunity to create, to be part of the background vocals on one of the tracks. And she sent out the sheet music and the audio track to anybody who wanted to do that with different voice parts. And so I had an opportunity to actually record myself doing a voice part as part of the choir and the background vocals for one of the tracks. And I think, as I understand it, she's also going to be releasing music videos. And on one of the music videos that will come out at some point in the next few months, I'll be there in the background in some small picture among those singing with the choir. So that's also kind of fun and special to have had the opportunity to be a part of that. But here you can see, and again, I'm going to post these all so that you can actually link to them, but all the various channels, Patreon, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, website, Instagram that Beth has out there. And it really is a cool thing that she's doing. Want to mention a couple of birthdays this week, and one of them is very, very special to me. My wife, Carol, has a birthday on October 4th of this next week. So for those of you who know Carol, if you're connected to her on Facebook, anywhere else, make sure that you do wish her happy birthday this week and help us celebrate that with her. We do have plans to celebrate. Yeah, we got plans on her birthday, and we got plans in the weekend following. And then Rick Venturi. Rick has a birthday. Rick, you're on here as well. So happy birthday to Rick. Rick has a birthday this coming week, and it's always fun to celebrate birthdays with family and friends. I enjoy doing that. Kim, your birthday is not coming up right now. I'm not going to give anything away, but your birthday is actually a springtime birthday, correct?
I'm a spring chicken.
Yeah. All right. We'll make sure that when the right time comes, we celebrate with you. But having said that, if you have a special day this week, it doesn't have to be a birthday. It could be a birthday, but it might be an anniversary, might be something else special that you celebrate, and you want to put it in the chat so we can celebrate with you. Make sure that you do that so that we do have that opportunity. We want to think of it as like we're all sitting around a big table right now, and you said, hey, by the way, this coming Tuesday is my birthday. Well, we would want to jump on that, right? So tell us about that. Or if you have a special day coming up, perhaps in the month of October. This is the last day. Kim, this is the last day of September.
I'm really excited about it, though, because fall's my favorite, and it's fall, but I don't feel like I can properly celebrate with all the pumpkin spice that I need in my life until October 1st hits. So I'm very much looking forward to October. And speaking of, I hope everyone celebrated a special day yesterday. National Coffee Day.
Yeah. And you know what? I feel a little bit foolish because I knew it was coming. And I knew it was here yesterday, and I kept thinking all day I should put something on the Coffee Breaks page, and I did not do it. And, you know, I, of all people, should have made sure I did that. But we can, listen, we can not posthumously.
Everybody drink.
Yeah, everybody drink, please.
I didn't know it was Coffee Day until I was Googling something or other, and I saw another squirrel. And once I realized it was National Coffee Day, I grabbed all of my coworkers and we walked down to the coffee shop where they had any large coffee, nitro, decaf, or otherwise, for $1.
Yes, and that was the other thing. A lot of places have very special ways of celebrating. Right, you can get very inexpensive cups of coffee, or some will do, you know, get your first cup free or that kind of thing. But yes, anyway. Let's just continue to celebrate. We'll celebrate Coffee Day every day. If you do have a special day coming up, though, make sure that you email and let us know about that so that we can put it on the calendar and include that. All right, I'm going to go back to my other format here just because it makes our faces bigger. There we are. Um, you know, we're going to change gears here because I want to talk about this weird word and all that it entails, synesthesia. And again, if you're just tuning in to join us, and you don't know who Kim Baker is, she's this person. But Kim is here for a couple of reasons. One, I've wanted to have her on as a co-host for quite a while, just because she's so fun to interact with in the chat during coffee breaks, but just as a person. And she was the one who actually recommended this topic. It's popped up in the chat before, but this word synesthesia, and Kim, you have synesthesia.
I do.
So I'm going to let you kind of talk a little bit about what you know about it. What is it, and why should we spend any time chatting about it?
Well, first and foremost, some people see it as a blessing and some people see it as a curse. In history class, I saw it as a curse because it did not help me with my tests at all. So synesthesia generally is described as a phenomenon where one sensory or cognitive pathway leads to involuntary experiences in a second cognitive pathway. So basically, there are a million combinations of sensory phenomena that could constitute synesthesia. Any of your senses, touch, sound, and sight seem to be the most common, may evoke a color sensation, or you may actually see a physical color with certain touches or sounds or other senses.
And I just tossed in that one of the most common ones, or more commonly recognized ones, is people who see music as colors.
Synesthesia, yes.
That's my choice of shirt today for this episode.
Perfect. If those colors suit the music, so that's the best thing is synesthesia manifests in everyone differently. So for me, A is red, B is dark like jewel tone green, C is light blue. But my friend Lindsay vehemently argues with me that A is yellow. Well, my mom's coworker also thought A is yellow, and let me tell you, they are both very wrong. A is not yellow, A is red. But
and again, just to point out that people are going, what do you mean A is red? That for you, your entire life, when you see words on a page, when you see letters, they don't, even if they're printed in black and white, that's not what you see.
And when I was a kid, I thought everything was like, well, I didn't really know. So I kept referring to A being red, B being green, and C being blue. And my mom had no idea what I was talking about. So I thought, oh, well, I got it from my ABC book. So I'll go show her. And I turned to the page. And, usually A is red for apple. Well, in this instance, it was, I forgot which ABC book it was, but there was no red on A. A was like aardvark, and aardvarks are not generally red. And then there was no green on the B page. But when I was a child, I physically manifested the colors on the page. I thought that whole page was red, that whole page was green. And it turns out it's not. So now word searches are fun for me because, like, if you've ever relaxed your eyes for one of those picture puzzles where you relax and then you see the 3D image, if I do that, I can look at a word search and see the colors on the search page instead of the letters. So it's easier to find, like, those contests where you have a page full of 8s and you have to find the 3.
Yeah.
Well, 8 is darker green than 3. So it's easy to relax your eyes and find the 3 real quick.
Or if you're looking at one of those word searches where it's just blocks of letters and you have to find the words within the horizontal or the vertical or the diagonal. Like if the word is aardvark, you see double A's very clearly as a certain color together, which is going to make some of those things stand out.
Yep. And even if I'm looking for the word beach, for example, well, A is more dominant than the green for B. So I'll actually look for the A's before I look for the B's, because I will see red more clearly than I see green.
You mentioned, and we're going to talk about some of the other manifestations and examples, but you mentioned that synesthesia can either be a blessing or a curse, and you talked about some of the positive things that you can do with it. But do you want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges even that you faced or that you know of that others have encountered because of synesthesia?
Yeah. So for me, I tried using it. History was my very worst subject. So I tried using it to not cheat on tests, but to like help with tests. But if I was asked a question, what happened in 1999? And I was given a list of names, multiple choice. Whichever name was red, because 1999 is dominant red, 9 is red. Whichever name was red is the one I would choose. But let's just say Michael Jackson was the name because M is red. Michael Jackson would not necessarily be the answer to what happened in 1999. But I would pick that because of this synesthetic connection.
Color association.
Yes. And the same with math, with numbers. Numbers are easier because I also combine it with a different form of synesthesia where you see numbers in like geographical location. So in my head, I do long division by seeing them in blocks and moving them around. But like if the answer 2 plus 2, what is 2 plus 2? Well, 2 is blue, 4 is pink. So your natural reaction isn't, 2 plus 2 is 4 because blue plus blue doesn't make pink, if that makes sense.
By the way, I'm just going to toss in here. As you're following along, watching this and trying to relate, there are a few things that I would like you to feel free to contribute in the chat. Number one, as we're talking about synesthesia, do you already know that you have some aspect of synesthesia and want to share what your manifestation or manifestations of synesthesia are? As you're listening to this, does it cause you to suspect maybe you never heard of synesthesia? Hang on. It's going to be like that
Everybody.
Today. Yeah. Maybe you never heard of it before, but all of a sudden you're going, oh my gosh, that's me. Or you're all of a sudden realizing it describes somebody else that you know and want to share about that. And the other thing is, as we're talking about this, if you have questions that maybe Kim can address so that we can look up for you and get back to you on, feel free to put those in. And we'll see what we can cover today, because I just find this is what I don't, by the way, I don't manifest synesthesia, but I find it very fascinating.
You're definitely on the list of who should. So I see a comment. There are a lot of, especially musicians, who manifest synesthesia. So sometimes if I'm listening to songs, the one that comes to mind most is Lindsey Sterling's. If you've heard of her, she's a violinist. And she has an album from a few years ago with a song called Arena. And that's one of the first songs where anytime I listen to it, no matter what mood I'm in, no matter what color of mood I'm in, I see the exact same physical picture when I'm listening to it. It's like a rose in a black background full of stars, and the rose is spinning according to the tempo. And it's really interesting because usually it's not a photo. For me, my synesthesia is more like watercolors, which is why I used to get very frustrated when I would try to paint someone's aura and I couldn't do it until I figured out it's because it's constantly moving depending on their mood and their body language and everything like that. So if you listen to music and you hear certain songs and those certain songs evoke color, please put that in the chat, because I would love to know what songs evoke your synesthesia the most.
So I don't know if you saw this, but Kathy McCormick had a question for you, because you talked about the fact that your mom thought you were crazy or something when you were growing up.
Yeah, I found that out. So I was 19 and I walked into my mom's office and she's like, hey, remember how you used to say, like, you used to talk about words being colors and all that? And I was like, yeah, I still do. And she said, well, we wanted to get you counseling because we thought you were nuts. But that was the day her coworker, she had confided in her coworker, and her coworker just said, well, tell Kim A's not red, it's yellow. And I was like, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? And that was the first time we heard the word synesthesia. My mom's coworker had just learned about it. And honestly, I want to say it's relatively new, but it might not be. We only learned about it in the early 2000s, information age, right? Like you can Google anything. But apparently some authors, musicians, composers from as far back as the 1600s are suspected of having had synesthesia. And so a lot of people are, they're put in a box like, oh my gosh, you're seeing colors, something's wrong with you. And to be fair, it is considered a neurodivergent, not disorder, but a neurodivergent phenomenon, because your brain is connecting senses that aren't usually connected. And yes, their color and aura change is highly dependent on mood and body language. So generally, people will have like base colors. So for my friend Natalie, her base colors are dark green, which ironically is her favorite color, and like yellow with a hint of goldish brown. If she's really agitated, those colors will mix in different ways and they'll move in different ways. So it's funny, there's only been one person that I can't read I work with him now, and I've tried to figure out his aura for months because his is the only static aura I've ever seen in my life. His colors, they're like really rigid. It's like a couple of triangles and lines, and the
Wow.
colors stay the same and there's no movement. And I still can't figure that guy out. But everyone else, they just move and flow and fluctuate, kind of like a slow moving watercolor.
So Shalane wants to know if with that is like being able to see people's auras, is that kind of like a living lie detector test or
That is
polygraph, you know?
such a great question. And sometimes, so there have been instances where I've been asked to go with a friend to meet someone, and they're like, I want to get your take on this person. And within a couple of minutes of meeting someone, sometimes, I mean, not always, it depends on if that person's being genuine and open, if they're, being vulnerable. I can tell when they're not because the depth of the colors is very shallow. But when people are more vulnerable, I can get a pretty good read. And it's actually like a tactile thing too, the way that my body responds if the hairs on my arms raise, or, if I notice their body language stiffens or they move in a different way. A lot of times I can get a pretty good read on people, and you can generally tell when they're lying. It's not like foolproof,
No.
but I would say yes, you can definitely tell when something's not right. And a lot of that too is listening to your gut and the way that your gut feelings are interpreted as the colors that you see on this person or that you project on this person. So actually, going into that, there are two forms of synesthesia. One is projective, which is where you physically see the colors or shapes or forms when one of your senses is stimulated. So like when you're listening to music, do you physically see something? Do you physically see blue when you're listening to this song? There are some that I do, and I love them. And associative, and that's where you have a really strong involuntary feeling, but it's not necessarily a physical projection of the color or of the other sense.
And I mean, I think to throw out some additional things, because we're talking a lot about like seeing colors and that type of thing, but it can be any number of sensory crossovers. For instance, there's some people that a smell or a taste might evoke a certain color or shape, or even tasting something and all of a sudden they get a sound. Or something else visually, or a sense of even something tactile happening. It's the more common ones, I think, to relate to have to do with visual, but
visual and sound.
But you could see where some of it could be very disruptive for people. I'm
like misophonia.
Yeah. So talk about that.
So I have misophonia. It wasn't even a thing until like just pre-COVID. So people at work started getting fired because their boss was chewing gum really annoyingly, and they punch them in the face and then they get fired. Well, it turns out that some people, myself included, have a neurological, like a physiological neuro response to certain sound stimuli. So if someone's smacking their gum or chewing it loudly or
chewing with their mouth open
or just being generally gross, sometimes I get a fight or flight response. Most of the time it's flight. I start to sweat. And in extreme situations where I can't get out of the situation, like my pupils will dilate, my vision will blur, my heart will race, and I'll just want to get away from the sound. Other times I will want to punch them in the face, but I have so far refrained from doing so. But other people, most often it's like gum chewing. Some people though, like chewing on fingernails or clipping your nails. I had a coworker who would clip her nails at her desk, and it didn't bother me actually, but my other coworker, she would have to leave the room. She could not stand the sound of the nail clippers.
Interesting. And Shalane, there's something here that you're maybe seeing in the chat going on back and forth. This for you, but also for others, is that for much of her life, Shalane has had this ability, we call it her stupid human trick, where you can give her a word and she visualizes the letters in the word rearranging into alphabetical order.
That is a type of synesthesia. Oh, but you can pronounce it?
She actually visualize it, and then she will phonetically say it back out loud in the order that she's seeing it. Yes.
So I think that might be spatial sequence synesthesia, where items in a sequence have spatial locations. And so you're spatially locating them back into the sequence where they belong.
And she does it voluntarily, I believe. And Shalane, you can comment on this. It's not that she looks at a page of words and can't read it because, because the letters start mixing up. She can be given a word orally, and in her mind, she sees the word. As long as she knows what the spelling of that word is and can visualize the word, she rearranges the letters.
That could be a mix of chromesthesia and spatial sequence, actually. So I do something very similar. And then there's also, let's see, there was another one. I don't think I wrote it down because it wasn't one of the more common ones. So there are like hundreds of types because
there are like
so many
6 or 7 basic ones that are most often recognized.
And I think the one that you have might be a mix of different ones because you're hearing the word, which is chromesthesia, to see the letters that you're hearing. But then because the letters then are assigned geographical locations in the word, I'm wondering if that's also a different one. So there's, I guess to go into the short of it, grapheme color. Let me back up. Altogether, in the world, about 4.4% of the population is alleged to have fully fledged synesthesia.
Yeah.
But with grapheme color, only 1%. That's the one where letters or numbers are associated with colors. Chromesthesia, there's about 1 in 3,000. I thought it'd be a lot more because so many musicians have chromesthesia, but it's where sounds evoke shape, color, and or movement. Then there's lexical gustatory. So 2 to 4% have this, where words or sounds evoke different tastes. So if you hear the word, I don't know, vacuum, you might taste something. I'd love to know what they taste when they hear the word vacuum. And then misophonia.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Gross cat hair. I don't know. I mean, that's in my coffee. It's a condiment anyway. Misophonia, about 18% of people have misophonia. And we're starting to think it might be a lot more because so many people are so agitated neurologically by different sounds. So I know, I think Carissa said that bass is very soothing for her. But for me, bass, it's very dark. It's like a very dark, deep color. And depending on the other sounds around it, it's actually like an anxiety response for me.
Interesting.
And then there's spatial sequence, which we just talked about. 10 to 15% of people have this, where items in a sequence have spatial locations. So if you imagine the alphabet, every letter has a specific location in space, according to how you picture it.
Okay.
There's auditory tactile, which is less than 1% of the population, where sounds evoke specific sensations in parts of the body. So a word or a pitch or a chord may make your finger hurt. You might feel pins and needles in your legs or something like that, depending on the sound. There's ordinal linguistic, where 1% of the population has this, where ordered sequences are associated with personalities or genders. And I found that fascinating. So some people, different numbers are boys and other numbers are girls. Or like A is a jerk, but B is this sweetie pie princess.
Yeah.
And then there's mirror touch, where 1.6 to 2.5% of people will feel the same or similar sensations to others. So Steve, when you're picking up your coffee cup, people with this form of synesthesia would feel as though they were physically picking up a cup of coffee and drinking it. Everybody drink.
Interesting.
So I want to know what kinds you guys have.
Yeah, I want to see those. And I know we're going to get short on time here, but you had also, you mentioned several and mentioned the fact that throughout history, now as we look back, there are people, well-known people, celebrities and others throughout history who, even by their own descriptions of what they experienced in different settings, and a lot of them are musicians or poets or authors or others, would talk about things that you go, oh, well, they obviously had synesthesia. But there are a number of more modern celebrities who either are known to have said themselves that they have synesthesia, or very much there's a suspicion that they might have it. And we're going to share a few of those here in just a moment. But I want to say, if you out there, if you know of some celebrities that you've heard of, that whether you knew about synesthesia before this, or you're going, oh, well, okay, now I get why so-and-so said this, feel free to share those as well. But we want to share a few of the celebrities who you were looking up that we know or suspect to have synesthesia. Go ahead, Kim.
So I guess I'm not sure if I gave you the right order, but Billie Eilish has tone color or music color synesthesia, also known as chromesthesia. And that's where, for her in particular, single tones and chords isolated from any musical context elicit specific colors. And I love this about her because her name, Billie, the B is dominant. Eilish, the E is dominant. The E matches her hair color right there. So I love that her synesthesia, for me,
Sorry,
it does.
I shouldn't say that
No,
because
that's a great point.
yeah,
it might not
but
for
I
other
mean,
people. And
yeah.
and now she's blonde. So if people think the word Billy is, yellow or cream, then it would work perfectly. But she openly talks about it. Elton John has synesthesia, which could explain a lot of his outfits, actually.
Could explain a lot about his outfits and also even some of his music.
Very much so. He has chromesthesia, where he also hears colors.
That isn't surprising.
And then
Lord.
Oh, boy, does she look really grown up in that picture. So
I know, isn't that interesting? I was looking at different pictures of her to include here, and it was difficult to find one where she didn't look very mature and serious.
Yeah, that's definitely not what was on her first album cover.
No.
But she has chromesthesia as well, which is sound color. And she says that she does use that to influence her music a lot.
Okay, that makes sense. Duke Ellington.
He's one of my favorites. So Duke Ellington had it, and he actually talked about it once, where I believe G was a light blue satin color, and D was a dark blue burlap, which I love because for me, G is like lavender gray, but D is like dark purple.
Interesting. Authors.
And is that Joanne Harris?
Yes.
So she had gustatory visual. She used to smell colors, which kind of explains her books, right? She wrote Chocolat and The Strawberry Thief. So very food-oriented titles, perhaps because those foods evoked the colors that she liked the best.
And not just the titles, but even the way that she went about incorporating some of those things into her writing, that you got a lot of the sensory elements as part of the storyline.
Mm-hmm. She was so descriptive.
And then Vladimir
Nabokov.
Yeah.
So he had grapheme color, and I thought I would find a lot more authors who had grapheme color, where you see words and letters as colors. Mm-hmm. Nabokov had it, and he wrote like The Gift and Lolita. Mm-hmm. And he was open about having synesthesia. And then other people you'd think have it, like Lindsay Sterling.
You mentioned your own experience with Lindsay Sterling's music.
I love her so much. Her song Arena is the only one that evokes like a consistent color visual, like a three-dimensional visual for me.
But she has never come out and said, I have synesthesia, but there are elements of her writing and her performance that seem to indicate some elements of that.
And with her costumes, and I also wonder if she has a tactile form, because she's also a professional dancer. She did ballet for years, and she still incorporates that. She, dances around the stage as she's playing her violin.
While she's playing, it's very movement oriented in her performance. And then Taylor Swift.
So Taylor Swift writes a lot of colors into her songs, like red. She recently did a song where she writes, it's called Maroon, and she writes about like the red lips and the burgundy wine and things like that. And you would definitely expect her with her creativity to have synesthesia, but apparently she doesn't. She was actually asked about it a little while ago, and she said the closest thing she's come to having it was listening to a different artist's song that recently came out. I forget which artist that was, but she's one you would think should probably have synesthesia, but she doesn't.
And Carissa just put something in here about Lolly Wren, who's actually going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. And when I had recorded my conversation with Lolly, I actually asked her about it. I don't think I did it during the recording, but we talked about it. And similar to Taylor Swift, she was like, no, music evokes a lot of emotion for me, but she was familiar with synesthesia, but doesn't think that she has it, Carissa. So, and then Nora Roberts.
So Nora Roberts is one of my favorite authors, and she uses color very, I would say, tactilely, because every time I read her books, it's a very clear visual for me, the setting and the color, and they're very bright colors that she uses. But I can't find anything on the internet indicating she actually has any form of synesthesia at all.
That's interesting. Well, again, out there in the chat, if you're watching this live, even if you tune in later, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but many people watch this after it's live streamed. They watch the recordings, and you can still participate in the chat. You can share your questions, you can share your comments, and we'll do our best to get back to every one of them. But if you think of any celebrities you know of after we've described elements of synesthesia that you think, I would think so-and-so has it, as Carissa mentioned about Lolly Wren, yes, feel free to to include your own, or maybe it's somebody else you know, and you're going, I never thought of this before. However, for instance, we think we discovered about Chelan being able to rearrange letters. So, well, Kim, this has been fascinating. And I know in a way we've only brushed the surface of talking about this. I did want to mention one more thing because you brought it up a few minutes ago. And again, it has to do with some of the stigmas that go with some of these phenomena. And you said that, especially when you were younger, there was this, like, what's wrong with you type of attitude
Are you
towards you,
crazy? Are you
describing, are you crazy?
schizophrenic? What do you
And the
mean you can
fact that
see
we
things that you
do
can't see?
include synesthesia as a neurodiverse phenomena, or being neurodivergent, and oftentimes other characteristics of personality or behavior that get included in neurodivergent thought processes include things like autism or Asperger's or borderline personality disorder. We kind of lump everything into this thing, and all
Anxiety,
neurodiverse,
OCD,
anxiety, and
empathy.
so many others. And the reality is that all neurodiverse means is it's not how we think of typical thought process. And so what's really typical? What's normal? And I think we need to break down some stigmas about a lot of different things. I mean, I could get on the soapbox about this. Another one, which I hope to cover at some point, because I found out, I learned this word recently and found out that my sister has this, is something called aphantasia, which is in a lot of the articles is now being associated with synesthesia, even though they're completely different. Where aphantasia is kind of almost a flip side of some of these synesthesia manifestations. Aphantasia is where somebody knows what an object is. If you say apple, they know what an apple is. If they see an apple visually, they'd say, yeah, it's an apple. But if you say apple, they cannot create a picture of an apple in their head. They may just see blurs or sparkles or just blackness. It doesn't mean that they've had a stroke or anything else, or that their memory is going. They just cannot create a visual picture of objects, which can also relate sometimes to where they forget faces. They don't know a face. They can't picture a face, but they'll recognize someone if they encounter them in a space. And so there are all these different ways that we think of neurodiverse process.
And a good way to think of it, especially the way synesthesia was described to me in, I think, my friend's psych class when I was interviewed for it, is that you're like, what's considered normal brain function, right, is that you have neurons going from one side to the other. And with people who have synesthesia, when a sense is evoked, another part of the brain that controls another sense is also lit up. And so you're using more of your brain at any one time than anyone else. So if someone tries to make you feel like stupid or less than for having this crazy synesthesia, then actually, technically, you're just using more of your brain at one time than most other people are known to do.
That is great. Well, a couple of things here. First of all, I think we've just covered the tip of the iceberg when it comes to synesthesia and some of these other neurodiverse things. And so I'm sure we're going to have more conversations about some of this. The other thing is definitely need to have you back to help co-host again, because this has been a lot of fun. But before we go today, I want to share a little bit about what some things that are coming up in the next few weeks. Oh, look, and there's one. Who is this?
This is Cholula.
Hello, Cholula. Thanks for joining us here. So next week, we have a guest by the name of Chris Gervais, who is a certified financial planner, is going to be on talking about what is financial planning and why do we care? And I know that's similar to, when we had the estate attorney on, people go, really, that sounds really dry. I think you're going to be surprised with Chris. I had a conversation with him this last week and we recorded that, and that's what we're going to be sharing next week. Chris does not come across in any way like a suit, nor does he communicate in any way that is stuffy. I think you're going to be both impressed and informed by Chris. So I would really encourage you to tune in and hear about this, because there's a lot that we need to think about when it comes to how do we plan for the present, the near term and the long term in terms of our finances, so that we're confident in where we're going. Some people say, well, I can't even put money in the bank. Watch and see what Chris has to say about all of this. And then in a couple of weeks, I already referred to this because Carissa mentioned some things. Lolly Wren is a voice teacher and a YouTuber, and her YouTube page is The Fairy Voice Mother. She is fascinating, quirky, amazing. She is from London, England, and actually currently lives in Portugal. But she's just fascinating to talk to. And I'm going to be introducing you to her if you don't already know her, but you need to be watching her YouTube channel for either the information, because her music video reactions are master classes in understanding vocal production, but she is also just funny to watch. So you'll want to tune in for that. And then I'm going to be off for 3 weeks because I'm traveling again. Carol and I are going to be back east for the work that she's doing. We're going to be spending some time on the weekends going out and doing some exploring around New England. So I'm not going to try to plug in coffee breaks that may only be a rush job. So we're going to take a little break, keep you posted on that. And then when we come back, I'm actually going to be down in California, in wine country, Petaluma, California, on November 11th, Veterans Day weekend. And if you recall, several weeks ago, we had Chris Kalenda and Dee Dee Kiso on talking about Sabre 6 Foundation. Sabre 6 is being featured in Petaluma for their Veterans Day celebrations, including being grand marshals in their parade, but there's going to be a variety of other things going on. There's going to be some special guests there. I'm going to be doing the show live from there. We're going to have Chris and Dee Dee back on talking about why Veterans Day should be important to us beyond just a day on the calendar, why we should be honoring those who have served our country. And then on November 18th, just kind of looking ahead a few weeks, one of our favorite people is going to be back. It's been a while since we've had Ann Davis East on here to talk about some books and authors, and she's going to be back to share some. I think I'm not positive what she's going to be sharing about, but I think as we go into the holiday season, it may have something to do with that. If you've got some topic ideas, like Kim did when she came to me and said we should have a conversation about synesthesia, you've got topic ideas or guests you'd like to see on the show, would you let me know? Especially if there's somebody you can make an introduction to, but even if it's just a thought process, let me know about it. We want to follow through on those. That's always exciting. And then a reminder that you can find episodes of Coffee Breaks with Steve on several of the podcast sites, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, as well as finding us on YouTube. And if you're not already following us or subscribed to my page and liking the videos on YouTube, I would ask that you please consider doing that. That helps us not only get more followers, but it increases our visibility in the algorithms for YouTube. And one of the reasons that's important, I'm not looking to pat myself on the back because I got hundreds of people who are tuning in. I want to make sure that when we're talking about topics like synesthesia, when we have fun co-hosts on like Kim Baker, when we have amazing guests on and topics that we're covering, that more people out there have an opportunity to see and hear what we're experiencing here. So invite your friends to go to the YouTube page and subscribe as well. Okay, that's my plug for that. And I'm just going to say now, once again, Kim Baker, thanks.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Hey, it's fun because it doesn't feel like we're, my goal is always that we're not trying to do an interview. We're having a great conversation. And that's what today was. This was fantastic. I had so much fun with this.
Me too. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. Absolutely. In the meantime, Kim, you have a great rest of your weekend. And for those of you out there, please have a great weekend. And please do not forget that we all have power. We all have voices. Find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. See you next time.